Enter a blue-haired girl running as she gets chased and fired at. After escaping, the same girl wakes up in bed shocked to see her own body and encounters a tiger-looking doll. The doll's name is Harakiri Tora, and it tells the girl, Natsuru Seno, that she was chosen to become a Kampfer. After freaking out for a bit, Natsuru wants to go back to sleep, so the doll helps her by kicking her in the face and knocking her out. When Natsuru wakes up, he's back to being a boy. Next, on his way to school, Natsuru tries to catch the bus only to barely miss. Luckily, his crush, Hide Sakura, misses the bus as well, thus they decide to wait for the next one together. Unfortunately, his bracelet begins to glow, so Natsuru tries to leave before transforming in front of Kade. But before he gets away, the same red-haired girl suddenly appears. A bus then drives past, and Natsuru takes the chance to run away, where he turns back into a girl with a brief magical sequence. After a brief fight, Kade comes over to look for Natsuru, but only finds the other girl, who turns and points the weapon at Kade, prompting Natsuru to throw a fireball to his surprise, resulting in an explosion which stops her. Natsuru then leaps across to save her from a lamppost, and the girl realizes what happened, so she decides to leave. Meanwhile, Kade checks to see if Natsuru is okay, but he just runs off. Afterwards, arriving back at school is a guy, Natsuru's friend, Mikito Higashida, tells him there's a girl outside wanting to see him who introduces herself as Akane Mishima. Akane reveals that she is that red-haired girl that attacked him earlier, except this time she's a shy, bespectacled librarian who seems to apologetically find lewd double entendres in everything that is said. She explains that there are two types of Kampfer, blue and red. It is also explained that each Kampfer carry one of three weapons, a short, newer or Zauber, akin to rock, paper, scissors. Shortly after, Akane tries to grab a German dictionary, so Natsuru grabs it for her, but a bunch of books falls, causing the two to tumble on each other. They are then interrupted by the student council president, and as she walks away, Natsuru's bracelet begins to flash again. Akane then escorts Natsuru to the roof of the female side of the school, where they hide and talk about why they turn into Kampfers. On the way home after school, Natsuru, back to being a boy, is wanted by Kade, where he thinks that she's finally going to confess to him. Instead, she asks Natsuru to introduce her to the female version of himself, without knowing that they are actually the same person. He then decides to ask Akane for advice the next day, but as the two of them are talking, they find themselves under attack by another Kampfer with a chain blade weapon that cuts through the bookshelves like paper. After one attack, Kade is shown standing in the rubble. Thinking she's the attacker, the transformed Akane points her gun in Kade's direction and fires. Natsuru then saves her from Akane by leaping over and grabbing Akane, causing the bullet to just miss Kade, but she faints as a result. The attack then still continues from the mysterious Kampfer, proving Kade's innocence, but the school bell goes off and the attacks randomly stop. Akane then leaves to go to class, leaving Natsuru to deal with the passed-out Kade. So Natsuru lifts her up and takes her to the nurse's office on the girl's side and lays her down in the bed. At the end of the day, Natsuru returns home as a guy and has a new postcard from Mikoto Kondo in Suriname. After reading the postcard, he has a little talk with Tora about the new enemy Kampfer. Nevertheless, the next day, Natsuru is summoned to see the student council president, along with Akane, about the attack in the library. After the meeting, Natsuru is approached by Kade about when will she be able to meet the female Natsuru, which Natsuru replies by saying tomorrow after school since he's a simp. He then invites Akane over to his house to discuss what he should do about that situation, but she originally misunderstands Natsuru's intentions. It was at that moment he decided that he would try to get Kade to hate his female version, but it doesn't go according to plan when Kade confesses to him instead. As such, an unsure Natsuru runs away, but as he returns, Shizuku Sengo is there instead and reveals herself as the enemy Kampfer, and after a few exchanged words, both Natsuru and Akane start to flee. However, they eventually come to a blocked end, so they have no choice other than to fight. Thus, Akane uses herself as a decoy, so Natsuru could concentrate to fire her Zauber at Shizuku, but she easily cuts it in half. Natsuru then comes up with a plan to set off the fire sprinklers, which succeeds, but Natsuru stops Akane from hitting Shizuku and strikes a deal with her instead to leave Kade alone. The next morning, Natsuru is told by the student council president that due to a determined Kade looking for his female version, he has to transfer to the girls' side of the school to stop all rumors that have been circulating, so Kampfers are still kept secret. Fast forward to the first day of school for girl Natsuru after being transferred. Finishing introducing herself to the class, she soon spots Akane. Shortly after, when the teacher is deciding where Natsuru should sit, Akane offers the spot next to her, but is then trampled to the ground as the other girls mob around Natsuru. The class rep then states that Natsuru will be sitting next to her. However, Kade bursts in and pulls Natsuru away from the crowd, saying that the student council president, Shizuku, has asked her to look after her. Afterwards, walking down the corridor alone, K-Day admits that she lied so they could be alone together, where she then confesses her love for the female Natsuru. At this point, Natsuru's bracelet begins to flash and once again runs from K-Day without giving an answer. He continues to run to the roof and starts panicking about being found out as a guy on the girl's side, but then the bracelet suddenly stops flashing as Akane shows up in her Kampfer form. She then tells him to go to the library if the bracelet ever starts reacting again. Back in the classroom, every girl begins admiring female Natsuru, where they continue to just stare. Suddenly, Masumi Nishino squeezes past the girls since she wants an interview with a new student. Masumi then interrogates him to try to get some dirt on him. Later, paper is released claiming that Natsuru is actually a girl like her, and as a result, Natsuru becomes more popular with the girls. Meanwhile, the chairman and the rest take advantage to make bank by charging money for people to see Natsuru. Afterwards, as they count cash, Natsuru tries to escape thinking that she's done, but the chairman tells her she has much more activities to complete. As such, Natsuru runs out the class and towards the gym, where 3 students tied him up. Regardless, at the end of the day, when Natsuru returns home still in Kampfer form, there is yet another postcard sent by Mikoto. After collapsing on his bed, the doorbell goes off and it turns out to be Akane with some cake. While eating, Natsuru leans in towards Akane, which she mistakes as a kiss, but Natsuru just tells her that she has cream on her face. The next day then begins and the chairman ambushes Natsuru, but K-Day steps in to save him, again claiming that Natsuru only loves one girl and only one. Afterwards, he then has lunch with K-Day, where Shizuku decides to join in as well, with the intentions of only making it more complicated for Natsuru by claiming that he's dating the male version of himself, causing K-Day to run off. Later, Natsuru is sat alone thinking to himself about K-Day's confession and about going to make female Natsuru hers, while the other guys are getting excited about the upcoming festival. None more so than Higashida, as it's rumored that one of the 3 beauties would be competing with him, being the self-acclaimed special advisor of the Hottie Research Club. However, it's revealed that Natsuru is involved, causing him to run off to confront the student council president about why he's got to compete. Shizuku simply explains that it's for the best interest for the school. Regardless, Natsuru claims he'd prefer not to enter, so Shizuku withdraws him but with a catch, so she gets him to give her a shoulder massage. He then accidentally becomes sussy, and when he finally realizes it, he pulls away in horror, but Shizuku thanks him. She then tells Natsuru to close his eyes, only for him to peek and sees her leaning in for a kiss, at which point Akane bursts through the door, guns blazing, and as a result, he still has to attend the beauty contest. Back at Natsuru's house, both Tora and Kuro Usagi mock Natsuru for having to compete in a beauty contest, while Akane apologizes for her actions. They then discuss what Natsuru can do for the contest since has no special talent, so Akane suggests singing. Meanwhile, Tora brings up what clothes he should wear and specifically mentions undies the most. So the next day, Akane and Natsuru meet up to go shopping and then head to a karaoke bar. At the undies store, he instantly dismisses what Akane picks out. However, Shizuku shows up as well to their dismay. He then tells Shizuku that it's her fault he has to spend money on a bra, so Shizuku offers to help, but Akane ends up dragging Natsuru away. Afterwards, K-Day shows up having been invited by Shizuku and the group head towards the karaoke bar. There, K-Day and Akane fight over who gets to sing a duet with Natsuru, so Shizuku suggests a competition where he gets to decide who's the winner. Thus, Shizuku goes first, followed by K-Day and finally Akane. As Akane sung, Natsuru recalls the latest postcard he had received. After the thought, he finds himself surrounded but all 3 and told to pick a winner, which he calls an all-a-draw. Shizuku then leaves saying she's got to make a call, and Akane goes to the bathroom, leaving Natsuru and K-Day together alone. She then tries to get an answer from Natsuru, but once again his bracelet begins to flash, so he quickly leaves and holds the door shut. He then begins to glow blue as Shizuku shows up, so Natsuru begs Shizuku to transform so he can remain in Kampfer form. Meanwhile, K-Day and Akane begin to argue over Natsuru, resulting in K-Day entering into the beauty contest to confess her love in front of everyone, so Akane does so as well. As such, Shizuku decides to partake in the contest as well. With the secret society in jeopardy, the Seitetsu High Festival is slated to continue with preparations underway. As such, the girls are busy working hard, while the boys attempt to get to the girls' side to peep on them. Meanwhile, in Natsuru and Akane's class, the other students are surrounding them to support them for the beauty contest. They then get the 2 to try on various outfits, while the treasurer takes photos of both of them. Afterwards, both are told to go change, but unbeknownst to them, their shadows through the curtain was being recorded. K-Day then bursts in hoping to see Natsuru in cosplay, only to find she's already finished getting dressed. Regardless, at the end of the day, Natsuru heads home, back in his male form, where he also encounters K-Day. He then takes the opportunity to mend his relationship with Kade, only for Kade to reveal that she suspects Akane may also like Natsuru. Nevertheless, he cheers up Kade, but she still regards male Natsuru as a rival. The next day, the festival has begun, where Natsuru encounters Kade in a wedding dress, which makes his fantasies come true. Akane then interrupts and tells Kade to wait, where she also joins in to get dressed. Meanwhile, Natsuru sits down in relief, but Shizuku appears out of nowhere, making him jump. She then asks him if he wants to see her change, but Archad refuses and walks into a separate room to change. The contest then begins with Masumi Nishino playing host. Natsuru comes out first with a rapture of screams and applause where she thinks of revealing her magic, but is forced to refrain from use of fire. Next, Kade walks onto the stage with the audience screaming for her too. She then attempts to confess her love for Natsuru in front of everyone. So she throws her bouquet into the crowd and tries to kiss Natsuru, making the crowd go wild. A shot goes off and Akane is found standing there in her Kampfer form. She then begins to shoot at the two, but he dodges the bullets as they come out unharmed, making Akane angry. So she shoots again, causing him to fall on top of her. Thus, the audience begin to chant "kiss her," but Akane pushes him off while causing a sussy scene, making the crowd go berserk. With Natsuru now preoccupied, Akane takes advantage and attempts to finish off Kade, but the weapon is somehow knocked out her hands. As such, Shizuku makes her entrance while throwing her cape onto Natsuru. Meanwhile, Akane picks her gun up and shoots at Shizuku, who easily cuts the bullets in half. She then throws her knife at everyone, knocks them all out, and thus gets announced as the winner. After the contest, Natsuru returns as a boy with Shizuku waiting for him. Natsuru then believes this was Shizuku's plan all along, but she just says she had to step in before it got out of hand. Regardless, he thanks her for doing so, but this isn't enough for Shizuku, so she kisses him. She then leaves Natsuru in a state of shock as she stole his first kiss. Later, Mikoto is seen walking out the front of the school upset she couldn't find male Natsuru, and shakes the bouquet in anger, but an entrails animal drops out and appears to have spoke. The next day, as Natsuru dreams about being alone with Kade, he attempts to kiss her, but she turns into Shizuku, causing him to wake up. He is then surprised to find his childhood friend Mikoto has returned and cooked him breakfast. While waiting for the bus to school, Mikoto asks Natsuru all sorts of questions, mainly about girls, but they get interrupted when Akane wanders over, but not long after arriving, she leaves after feeling uneasy about finding out that the two have been friends since they were little. However, Natsuru's bracelet begins to flash, prompting him to flee away from Mikoto before he transforms. Now forced in Kampfer form, he heads to school but is ambushed by the committee chairperson and forced to participate in a quasi-maid cafe, where he is now the star attraction in the cafe. When Higashida is served, he is given tricky spicy tea that sends him running. Meanwhile, Natsuru is told that a VIP guest will be arriving soon and has requested that he specifically would be the maid to serve them. But the VIP guest turns out to be Shizuku and has paid the cafe very well. As such, she gets Natsuru to sit with her, where she warns him that a new Kampfer will be coming along. Nevertheless, Kade later joins them and Shizuku subtly probes her to see if she has any knowledge concerning Kampfers and the entrails animals that spawn them. Afterwards, Shizuku slyly gets Kade to ask Natsuru for a kiss, but she declines and settles for a date around the festival instead. Later, as they enter into a haunted house, Natsuru is attacked by a new red Kampfer, whom he eventually figures out that it must be Mikoto. Regardless, Akane later intervenes and the fight is stopped by Shizuku, who asks Natsuru and Akane to reveal their true identities to her. As such, after everyone gets on the same level, Shizuku agrees on a truce, as she wants to unravel something. Meanwhile, as Natsuru apologizes for abandoning Kade, she asks him to spend the night at her house. Now getting ready, he's excited that he's finally been invited to Kade's house. Unfortunately, the invite is for his Kampfer form. Regardless, he leaves his house, but is confronted by Shizuku and Akane, who learn of the invite from Kade. Akane then rebukes him for not telling her, so the girls have invited themselves to Kade's house. Upon arriving, it's revealed that she lives alone as her parents are overseas working as diplomats. The group then walks in and find entrails animals littered everywhere. Meanwhile, Kade goes off to get everyone drinks, and when she returns, she suggests the stick-kissing game. She offers to demonstrate with Natsuru, but Akane stops her. Nevertheless, they play the game, but Akane tries forfeiting only for Kade to disallow her. So they begin to eat the sticks, where as always, Shizuku declares herself the winner. The group then decided on another game which pairs Akane with Natsuru, so Kade wants a Rido to no avail. As such, they play the game by putting sticks in their mouth and eventually stop due to Kade not getting what she wanted. Afterwards, Kade shows them her entrails room, where she introduces them one by one. Shizuku then asks her which one she loves the most, and she picks out Hyaburi Rayan, explaining that she got him while in middle school. Suddenly, Mikoto bursts in, having looked for Natsuru and has brought curry with her, so everyone sits down and has a plate. Afterwards, Keide asks Natsuru if he's staying over, but Shizuku pours curry all over him. As such, in the bathroom, Keide tells her what she needs to do. However, Natsuru wants to transform back since he's embarrassed to take a shower as a female, but unable to due to Keide peeping. Meanwhile, as Akane stops Keide, Shizuku is seen taking Hyaburi Ran. Afterwards, the two begin to argue over who will sleep next to Natsuru, leading to him having to sleep within the entrails room. However, he accidentally returns to normal form by accident, but has to hide under the covers when the door opens. Regardless, Keide sneaks into the bed with him, and upon getting closer, she feels Natsuru's hair but realizes it's suddenly shorter, so she pulls the hood of the pajamas, at which point Akane interrupts in her Kampfer form, firing shots into the air and gets angry at Keide and Natsuru, who turns back into Kampfer form. She then fires several more shots while Natsuru dodges them all, but Keide is found unconscious. As such, Akane tries to confess to Natsuru, but is interrupted when the window gets smashed by an unknown Kampfer, who reveals herself as Rika, who contains a unique white bracelet. She then begins a fight with Natsuru and Akane, easily dodging their attacks, but is luckily disarmed by Shizuku, so she decides to retreat. Afterwards, Natsuru apologizes to an unconscious Keide for getting her involved, upon which Shizuku comes in. He then gets embarrassed looking at Shizuku, but she questions him about what exactly was Keide doing previously. Nevertheless, Natsuru leaves to go clean up, while Shizuku wonders if she's actually jealous and in love with Natsuru. The next day, Natsuru is asked out on a date by Shizuku. He, however, thinks she has an alternative motive rather than her liking him, but he agrees anyways. Masumi then appears, having eavesdropped in their conversation, seemingly shocked at first but runs off happy as she got gossip to report on. However, Natsuru is unhappy with this, realizing he's in trouble if the Shizuku fan club found out. Luckily, Masumi discards the idea of them going on a date, thinking there's no way those two would be dating. Back at home, Tora tries convincing Natsuru that it's an actual date, but he still believes it's fake. Upon Sunday morning, Shizuku prepares bento for her date with Natsuru. Eventually, at the meeting point, Shizuku arrives and she's happy to see he arrived early, but he thinks this is to raid the White Kampfers base. However, Shizuku suggests they go to an aquarium while he attempts to figure out who White Kampfers are. Later, they walk by a gift shop and Shizuku asks a reluctant Natsuru if he's going to buy her anything as a memento for the date, so he indeed gets her something. Upon leaving the aquarium, Shizuku grabs hold of his arm, which he thinks is a way to lower the defenses of the White Kampfers. His belly then grumbles, so they set up a picnic to eat what Shizuku had made. She then tries to feed him, but he refuses to open his mouth, so he ends up falling with Shizuku on top of him, so he finally does so. Shizuku then asks him why he likes Keide, but he thinks about fighting the White Kampfer. As such, Shizuku starts questioning the existence of the White Kampfers and rants about defying the so-called moderators, refusing to be a pawn and wanting revenge for her friend that had been destroyed. After finishing speaking, she finds Natsuru has fallen asleep. Upon awakening, he finds himself on Shizuku's lap. Nevertheless, on the way back, she asks him to walk her home and possibly stay over. However, they are interrupted by Mikoto, who comes flying and kicking him in the face. She then confronts him and is mad that he's out with Shizuku, who explains that it's just a trap to lure out the White Kampfer, but Mikoto refuses to believe him. As such, he asks Shizuku for her help, so she reveals that they were actually on a date. She then begins to leave and hints that they have kissed. Regardless, Natsuru begs her to help him, only for Shizuku to reply saying she enjoyed the date. Thus, an enraged Mikoto sends him flying with a punch. Back in his room, Akane bursts in, having been informed of the date, so she asks him what his type is other than Keide, so he says in mid-sprang Akane, causing her to transform, where she joyfully fires shots everywhere. After the entire ordeal, Natsuru attempts to figure out what exactly happened today, but just can't. Excited for their date, Akane is unable to contain her excitement for the next day. The next morning, upon meeting up, both Natsuru and Akane decide to head to a water park. Unfortunately, Shizuku and Mikoto sneak up on them and reveal that they too will be staying in the same hotel that night. Regardless, the girls notice Natsuru isn't all enthused, but he finally lights up upon seeing Keide, although she's too busy looking for his female version. As such, Shizuku tells her that she'll come along later. Now by the swimming pool, the girls attempt to show off their bathing suits to Natsuru, but he's too busy staring at Keide. Eventually, he asks her to go swim with him, but she declines. Instead, they go down a water slide where Mikoto ends up pushing Akane off a diving board. Afterwards, Shizuku ends up sitting really close to Natsuru, but Akane moves in closer while Mikoto is left behind. K-Day then shows some support for Shizuku by telling Natsuru not to go for other girls. Shortly after, he transforms and K-Day goes up to him and asks if she could teach her to swim. However, he tries to wingman his male self, but she instantly shoots down the notion. He then continues to try harder, only to get his spirit and heart broken. Thus, he finally gives up and helps K-Day as his female self. While helping, K-Day grabs hold of Natsuru thinking she was going to drown. Akane then comes over to separate the two, but K-Day doesn't let go, causing Akane to cling on him as well. Shizuku then comes to the rescue, but three girls from earlier are seen watching them. Nevertheless, Shizuku sends Natsuru to go shopping, but is given the wrong directions. As such, he asks for directions, but a girl turns around and shows her white bracelet before firing an attack. Natsuru blocks it but gets sent backwards, and another appears wielding a sword, making Natsuru fall over. While they have Natsuru at gunpoint, they begin introducing themselves and reveal that K-Day plays an important role in this battle set up by the moderators. Luckily, Akane fires a bullet, but the two begin to argue in front of the dumbfounded white Kampfers. Still outnumbered, Shizuku finally arrives and reveals that she knew they would reveal themselves if one of them were alone. Meanwhile, Akane and Natsuru begin to argue again, which allows the white Kampfers to escape with Hitomi firing her Zauber to create a blinding light. Shizuku counters by throwing her Schwartz in hopes of stopping them, but misses. As such, Shizuku begins to have suspicions about K-Day. Later that day, male Natsuru collapses onto his bed, exhausted from the ordeal earlier. He recalls that he went to see K-Day, but she was more worried about female Natsuru. Suddenly, the door opens and messengers all walk in, having been to the hot spring. They then ask Natsuru to help dry them up, which he aggressively does so. The phone then rings and Mikoto invites them to their room to hang out before the fireworks begin. He then finds Akane on his bed, expecting a sussy moment, but it's all a misunderstanding. Nevertheless, they group decide to watch the fireworks outside while K-Day gets worried for when female Natsuru will be showing up. Regardless, she pours a drink into 2 cups, kisses one and hands it over to Natsuru, surprising everyone. However, the girls bring up how Natsuru had a date with Shizuku, whom doesn't help him in the situation at all. Instead, makes it worse by showing the present he gave her. As such, Mikoto gets super angry at Natsuru for not telling her, especially about the kiss. Thus, Shizuku kisses Natsuru again right in front of everyone, but she explains to K-Day that it's a one-sided love affair. Mikoto then berates Shizuku for doing it and turns to Akane for help, but she's too shocked to do anything. Meanwhile, K-Day stands up to take Natsuru outside, where she hypnotizes him, and the two start watching the fireworks without the others. Natsuru then finds himself next to K-Day, who tries to hypnotize him to make Shizuku his. She then disappears when Natsuru, who can't remember anything, is confronted by Akane, Shizuku, and Mikoto. As such, they return to the hotel, where K-Day doesn't appear to recall anything either, like a sussy beka. Afterwards, they all head to go to the baths, where Natsuru's lightning-quick hypnotism kicks in again, causing him to head over to Shizuku's room to make a daring romantic move. However, during his hypnosis, Shizuku ends up kissing him again, which causes him to actually snap out of his hypnotism brought upon him. As such, Shizuku asks why Natsuru came after her, being displeased by hearing that he was forced to go after her by Sakura. Thus, she knocks out Natsuru and leaves with giving him a kiss again, but this time on the cheek, saying that she won't let him have her way with her so easily due to her pride, although feeling a little regret for giving up the chance she has. It is then revealed that K-Day appears to be in total command of the white Kampfers. Nevertheless, the next day, K-Day whispers something in Shizuku's ear, basically saying that she should swallow her pride, which easily confirms her suspicions from earlier. Now with the truth finally revealed, Shizuku invites Natsuru over to her house to tell her about K-Day, where she gets K-Day's burnt-to-death lion doll to spill the beans about the Kampfer system. She then recalls that her close friend Tamika was destroyed in an intense Kampfer battle, and has ever since sworn vengeance against whomever is responsible for the establishment of Kampfer combat. As such, when Natsuru confronts K-Day about this, he once again falls under K-Day's hypnotism. With Natsuru now under her control, K-Day and the white Kampfers successfully trap and capture Shizuku, Akane, and Mikoto. Nevertheless, when the three of them wake up later chained together, K-Day tries to get Natsuru to finish them herself, but he spots a keychain he previously bought for Shizuku and is luckily able to snap out of the hypnotism and begins declaring that he will not betray his friends despite his undying love for K-Day. His epic declaration encourages Shizuku, Akane, and Mikoto to fight with renewed resolve, enabling them to break free and allowing them to easily defeat the white Kampfer. Thus, K-Day tries enticing Natsuru once again, and he transforms back into normal form, putting himself out of the fight and out of K-Day's disposal, as well as forcing K-Day and the white Kampfer into retreat. With the battle now over, Shizuku, Akane, and Mikoto turn their attention to Natsuru, initially jumping him for trying to make out with Kaede in front of them, before once again competing against each other to see who can appeal to Natsuru best with their qualities, to the point of kissing him, grabbing his hands, and doing very sussy things not allowed on YouTube. Regardless, Natsuru wakes up one day on Christmas Eve morning to find out that he and his tiger messenger, Harakiri Tora, have actually swapped bodies. As such, Tora decides to head on outside to enjoy this once-in-a-lifetime occasion to meet Natsuru's friends Mikoto, Shizuku, and Akane on the streets, only to notice that they've been body swapped with their messengers as well. As such, the messengers have fun with their new bodies until they are caught sneaking out from a food bill and are told to perform in a show as reparations. Meanwhile, Kaede then encounters them and takes them to an amusement park, where they begin to get hyped and play very sussy games with her. Afterwards, Kaede goes to a church to confess the sin of having feelings for multiple girls, but she just ends up being punished by the student council. Nevertheless, the messengers come to save her, but end up fighting each other when they discover that now they can actually feel pain. As such, after saying their goodbyes to Kaede, they ride off on a sleigh, with the whole thing being a bizarre Christmas story that we totally expected. The next day in school, Kaede seems her usual harmless self and Shizuku interrogates Hayaburi Rain, where she soon becomes convinced that Kaede is either a moderator or somehow allied to them. Meanwhile, Akane and Mikoto's kissing practice becomes the real deal and is observed by Sayaka Nakao. As such, Mikoto's pursuit of Sayaka leads her to the other white Kampfer and tsundere Bakuhatsu penguin, who ends up hypnotizing her. As such, Kaede then invites female Natsuru to see the stars. Upon arriving, Kaede says something about fulfilling her promise to him and says to her that it's true that Natsuru does actually love her. Regardless, later on with Kaede lying down, Natsuru turns back to his male form on top of Kaede, where she tells him to lead. Now this episode becomes super sussy, so I will leave it to your imagination. Mikoto then arrives, but in hypnotized form. However, with Natsuru still in his male form, Kaede stands up, pins Natsuru down. Mikoto then sits on him and begins to do sussy things. Luckily, Shizuku and Akane arrive in their Kampfer form, where Akane quickly shoots Kaede, causing her to fall down. Meanwhile, Mikoto transforms into her Kampfer form to battle Shizuku. While the two fight, Kaede stands up unharmed, saying that it's rude to shoot her like that. Regardless, Akane tries to shoot again, so she summons her sword while Akane chases after her. Shizuku then tells Natsuru to follow the two since it's the perfect time to escape, and reveals that Mikoto needs to be shocked to no longer be hypnotized. As such, Natsuru escapes, turning to his Kampfer form, and follows Kaede and Akane. On his way, he encountered the rest of the white Kampfers. However, the white Kampfers, minus Ryoka, begins to argue to each other, so Natsuru quickly burns them with his Zaber. Shizuku, making a gun out of her fingers, shoots Mikoto, causing her to turn back to normal. Thus, Mikoto and Shizuku follow the others, but Akane and Kaede end up in a circus. Enter a Mexican standoff until Mikoto appears to save Akane and Shizuku, but left herself in danger. Luckily, Natsuru arrives to save Mikoto while Kaede is reunited with the other escaping white Kampfers. Afterwards, Shizuku asks Natsuru how far he went with Kaede, with the other two girls super curious as well. However, he runs while the girls chase him in his Kampfer form, while Mikoto is left behind hurting.